going to be reading from Zechariah 2, 6 to 11. Up, up, flee from the land of the north, declares the Lord, for I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heavens, declares the Lord. Up, escape to Zion, you who dwell with the daughter of Babylon. For thus said the Lord of hosts, after his glory sent me to the nations who plundered you, for he who touches you touches the apple of his eye. Behold, I will shake my hand over them, and they shall become plunder for those who serve them. Then you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me. Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for behold, I come, and I will dwell in your midst, declares the Lord. And many nations shall join themselves to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in your midst. And you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. And the Lord will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem. Be silent, all flesh, before the Lord, for he has roused himself from his holy dwelling. When we face problems, we can know that God is the person who we can turn to. Hear the story of a young woman returning as told by Philip Yancey in his book, What's So Amazing About Grace? Yancey tells the story of a prodigal daughter who grows up in Traverse City, Michigan. Disgusted with her old-fashioned parents who overreact to her nose ring, the music she listens to, the length of her skirts, she runs away. She ends up in Detroit, where she meets a man who drives the biggest car she's ever seen. The man with the big car, she calls him boss, recognizes that since she's underage, men would pay premium for her. So she goes to work for him. Things are good for a while. Life is good. But she gets sick for a few days, and it amazes her how quickly the boss turns mean. Before she knows it, she's out on the street without a penny to her name. She still turns a couple of tricks a night, and all the money goes to support her drug habit. One night, while sleeping on the metal grates of the city, she began to feel less like a woman of the world and more like a little girl. She begins to whimper, God, why did I leave? My dog back home eats better than I do now. She knows that more than anything in the world, she wants to go home. 3 straight calls home get 3 straight connections with the answering machine. Finally, she leaves a message. Mom, Dad, it's me. I was wondering about maybe coming home. I'm catching a bus up your way, and it'll get there about midnight tomorrow. If you're not there, I'll understand. During the 7-hour bus ride, she's preparing a speech for her father, and when the bus comes to a stop in the Traverse City station, the driver announces the 15-minute stop. 15 minutes to decide her life. She walks into the terminal, not knowing what to expect, but not one of the 1,000 scenes that have played out in her mind prepares her for what she sees. There, in the bus terminal in Traverse City, Michigan, stands a group of 40 brothers and sisters and great aunts and uncles and cousins and a grandmother and a great-grandmother to boot. They're all wearing goofy party hats and blowing noisemakers. And taped across the entire wall of the terminal is a computer-generated banner that reads, Welcome Home. Out of the crowd of well-wishers breaks her dad. She stares out through the tears quivering in her eyes and begins her memorized speech. He interrupts her. Hush, child. We've got no time for that. No time for apologies. We will be late. A big party is waiting for you at home. The scripture says, up on your feet. Get out of there. And now. God says so. Return from your far exile. I scattered you to the 4 winds. God's decree. Escape from Babylon, Zion, and come home now. The message succinctly tells us we must do something. The girl from Traverse City had to make that fourth telephone call, leave a message, get on the bus, and get off of the bus. The Israelites had to flee Babylon. The city had been taken twice. It was time to move. The Persians were coming, who were bringing cruelty to those inhabiting Babylon. When God says move, you better obey, and obey quickly. An obedient child of God listens and obeys without question, not saying, yeah, and continuing with what he or she was doing before the command. It is not time to arrange furniture, sort pictures, go shopping. It's time to grab what you need and obey without looking back. If more of us did this, more people in the world would be turning to God one life at a time. We must return home to God and bring people along as we go. He knows and He cares for His children. When the girl was treated cruelly by her master, God felt her pain. The message says in Zechariah 2:9, the godless nations who stripped you and left you homeless will be stripped and thrown out by their own servants. Anyone who hits you hits me, bloodies my nose, blackens my eye. I will dwell in your midst, God says. He desired that His people would return home, running from their enemies or problems into His care and protection. Jeremiah 31:10 says, hear the word of the Lord, O nations. Proclaim it in distant coastlands. He who scattered Israel will gather them and will watch over His flock like a shepherd. When we turn to God, obey Him, and own the divine mission He has designed for us, He will be right there with us. We can count on Him during any problem we face. Monica Dickens gives a great example of how a young boy trusted God with his problem. David, a 2-year-old with leukemia, was taken by his mother, Deborah, to Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston to see Dr. John Truman, who specializes in treating children with cancer and various blood diseases. Dr. Truman's prognosis was devastating. He has a 50-50 chance. The countless clinic visits, the blood tests, the intravenous drugs, the fear and pain, the mother's ordeal can be almost as bad as the child's because she must stand by, unable to bear the pain herself. David never cried in the waiting room. And although his friends in the clinic had to hurt him and stick needles in him, he hustled in ahead of his mother with a smile, sure of the welcome he always got. When he was 3, David had to have a spinal tap, a painful procedure at any age. It was explained to him that because he was so sick, Dr. Truman had to do something to make him better. If it hurts, remember it's because He loves you, Deborah said. The procedure was horrendous. It took 3 nurses to hold David still while he yelled and sobbed and struggled. When it was almost over, the tiny boy, soaked in sweat and tears, looked up to the doctor and gasped, "Thank you, Dr. Truman, for my hurting." Can you thank God for the trials you go through? Do you truly believe God knows what's best for you? Do you trust Him with your problems? Zechariah says, "Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion. For behold, I come, and I will dwell in your midst, declares the Lord. I'm on my way. I'm moving into your neighborhood." In John 17:25-26, Jesus says, "Righteous Father, the world has never known you, but I have known you, and these disciples know that you sent me on this mission. I have made your very being known to them, who you are and what you do, and continue to make it known, so that our love for me might be in them exactly as I am in them." Jesus desires that His followers become His hands and feet to a world that desperately needs to know Him. Every year in Alaska, a 1,000-mile dog sled race run for prize and prestige commemorates an original race run to save lives. Back in January of 1926, 6-year-old Richard Stanley showed symptoms of diphtheria, signaling the possibility of an outbreak in the small town of Nome. When the boy passed away, a day later, Dr. Curtis Welch began immunizing children and adults with an experimental but effective anti-diphtheria serum. But it wasn't long before Dr. Welch's supply ran out, and the nearest serum was in Nenana, Alaska, 1,000 miles of frozen wilderness away. Amazingly, a group of trappers and prospectors volunteered to cover the distance with their dog teams, operating in relays from trading post to trapping station and beyond. One sled started out from Nome, while another, carrying the serum, started from Nenana. Oblivious to frostbite, fatigue, and exhaustion, the teamsters mushed relentlessly until, after 144 hours in minus 50-degree winds, the serum was delivered to Nome. As a result, only one other life was lost to the potential epidemic. Their sacrifice had given an entire town the gift of life. If God has a mission for you, won't you brave the elements to save a town of people who would die otherwise? Are you willing to sacrifice time or stuff to contribute to the saving of lives? We are to return to God, knowing that the problems we face build our faith. When our faith is stronger, we should do whatever it takes to build God's kingdom by reaching people for Christ. We cannot save people. That's God's job. Our job is to share what we know about our relationship with the God who welcomed his people when they returned from exile, causing rejoicing and promised to be by their side. Zechariah says, "And many nations shall join themselves to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in your midst, and you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. And the Lord will inherit Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem." If God is doing something, I want to be part. I don't want to miss anything. I want to see what he does and rejoice and sing. We know that God will triumph. We can have hope. He will accomplish his purpose. I become contemplative and reverent when I think about this. I love how this passage ends in the message. Quiet, everyone. Shh. Silence before God. Something's afoot in his holy house. He's on the move. Are you prepared to join in God's mission? Are you ready to take on Zechariah's plan to be a part of what God has in store? Be ready. Listen, obey the command, and participate in God's redemption